Welcome to Seeking the Sacred Self. I'm your host, Naomi Rozak. Today I thought we'd talk a little bit about why I want to do this podcast, what the whole why of it is. I want to create a place where we talk about what really goes on inside us, especially the kinds of feelings we have that are pushed deep down, or for the deep feelers and thinkers out there, are really big feelings. I think in culture, we often talk about the idea that we have emotions, and then we talk about the choices and behaviors that we should be making out of these emotions. And we don't create enough space to say how big these feelings really are and how much they affect us. I am a deep feeler and a deep thinker. I often think about a subject for months and years before I'm willing to talk about it. I process everything deeply and internally for a long time before I'm able to come up with responses to different life circumstances. And a lot of my story is that I spent many years, actual decades, deeply feeling some very large things that were uncomfortable and difficult to talk about because nobody else was talking about them. Nobody was normalizing these experiences. And so I just want to create a bit more of a space to talk about what these feelings are like, why they're inside of us, especially these ones that we push down, that we're a little bit frightened to acknowledge, and allow people to validate and understand that their experience of those feelings is completely normal. It's part of the human experience. And in fact, the more that we give ourselves permission to feel and to process deeply, the more we can actually get to the root of what is causing the feelings and heal our lives. So, like I said, these feelings can be the kinds that are pervasive, overwhelming, paralyzing to us. Often we even want to get better. We want to change something. We would like to make different choices, but the feeling is so big that it literally prevents us from acting. It's almost as if we don't have a choice towards change because we're so ridden by the depth, the bigness of a feeling. We just feel stuck. And we do try. We try to change. We try to improve our lives. We try to get away from the feeling, and we try to, positive affirmation our way out of it. We try to talk our way out of it, change habits to get out of it. And those things are just not going to cut it for these kinds of feelings. That's why if we want to find ways to feel better, we have to go back to where our feelings come from. We have to learn to trust our feelings, to trust that they're there for a good and valid reason, and that they have something to show us. Not that they're there to wreck our lives, to make us feel powerless, to keep us stuck. It's actually the literal opposite. They're there to change our lives. They're there to help us feel better. They're a little bit of a gift in that they will sit there and they will cause trouble for us until we have the willingness to explore why they're there and to go a bit deeper, to get to the bottom of what they're trying to tell us. It's super important to trust what we feel and not shame it, to say, I shouldn't be feeling this feeling. I shouldn't have this experience. That is denying our feelings and denying one of the inbuilt ways we are meant to decipher life, to navigate life, to hear information from inside of us. It is given to us. It is born and wired into us as a way to navigate life. So shoving feelings away, trying to change our lives without addressing difficult feelings that are there, is going to keep us stuck for sure. Say, for example, you feel powerless. The way to navigate this feeling of powerlessness, to even shift it if possible, is to feel into powerlessness. Get a little comfortable with it. Instead of shoving it down, let it bubble up and start to ask some questions. Where does the feeling of powerlessness pop up in your life? What's the trigger? When did the feeling first appear? When were you first aware of it? What was the event that sowed this feeling into your life for the first time? You may or may not know. That's okay. This is just about exploring, getting a bit more familiar with the feeling, becoming more comfortable with it. What do you believe about you and your power because of that initial event or the time that feeling came into your life and what happened after that? And what if what you believed because of that event or feeling is not all there is to the story? What if there's more? When we accept what we feel and we start to explore it, it allows us to dig deeper into truth. Originally, we might think the feeling is blocking us. It's keeping us stuck. It's too big. It's too heavy. It's too hard. It's something to avoid. And if I didn't feel like this, life would be so much better. Here's the secret. We don't have to avoid the feeling. If we sink into it and start exploring, we can ask it, why are you here? What do you have to show me? And then it starts to talk back to us. This is something we don't always know. We all have an innate, a natural built-in listening system in our bodies. It's an ability to hear your feelings and to also hear information about why they're there. And this may be, we're going to go into this deeper in more episodes, but it may be physically feeling sensations, pinching, tension, pain. It may be inner senses. It may be intuition, memory, thoughts, or just a deep knowing or deep trust or distrust about things, and then our feelings. There's more than this. This is just a brief overview of where we're going. So when we dig into the feelings, we begin to uncover the roots of why that feeling is in our life. We begin to gain more knowledge about it, and we begin to understand at a deep emotional and energetic level what's going on in our lives, what the root of the feeling was. And then we can begin to invite in change because we're not stuffing down this feeling. We're not running away from a piece of ourselves. We're inviting all the pieces of ourselves back on board. We see the whole story of what happened back when that feeling came to be in our lives, and we stop being critical of ourselves. We stop saying that we're bad or wrong, we're not good enough, we're too much, and we start believing that in that initial event, when the feeling came to be in our life, or around the time, if we don't know the original event, we were simply present for something that was very difficult and confusing. And in order to bear the pain of that difficult and confusing thing, without even thinking it through, because often this happened when we were very young and we didn't have the ability the emotional intelligence to know about all these things, we dealt with that hard thing in the only way we knew how. But doing that changed something in us. It disconnected us from part of ourselves. It's like we had to cut off a piece of ourselves in order to not feel that uncomfortable, in order to continue to cope with our lives. So now the feeling that sits there because of that disconnected piece. The feeling is almost a doorway behind which sits a piece of yourself that you think on a deep subconscious level does not belong in your life. You're not even thinking. There's just a deep thing happening in your body where you have acknowledged that some piece of yourself is uncomfortable and you don't want to go there. And the deep down feelings you have are often behind which those pieces of ourselves are. The feelings are trying to show us the place where we're disconnected. But how we interpret the feeling sitting there is, I am wrong. Because if I was right, I wouldn't feel like this. If I was doing right, if I was the right person, I would feel good and I would feel successful and my life would look a certain way. But instead, I have this stupid feeling deep down inside and I can't feel good no matter what I try. But if we're able to get past that interpretation of I'm wrong and dig down into that feeling, we will find out where we disconnected from some good and vital piece of ourselves. And we can reconnect to that piece again once we understand that it's not shameful, it's not wrong. We can accept that piece and we can discover it's good and we can become more whole. When we become more whole, the feeling is gone because its purpose and message was heard. And in place of the disconnection, in place of the hard feeling, connection flows in. happiness flows in, contentment, fulfillment, all the good that we are meant to feel, that we are meant to be connected to, is waiting behind the difficult feeling if we're just willing to explore it. So that's all feelings are. They're simply signals and messages that, if we're willing to tap into them, allow us to move closer and pay attention to what's really going on. They're meant to signal to us something is going on, and I, the feeling, want to tell you about it. You can see how we can't necessarily change our behavior when a feeling that big and that pervasive is in our lives, because that feeling represents that we have disconnected from a piece of ourselves. Any choices we make where we try to change ourselves becomes performance, it becomes inauthenticity, and it contributes to a bigger feeling of, I am unworthy, I'm not good enough. I have to disconnect to more of myself because now I have to disconnect from my actual feelings in order to make this better choice. And for sure, many of us are going to try. We're going to try hard to get to a place of, well, just where we feel that we look good, where we feel we are hitting the marks. I did this for many years. It was almost the only way I knew how to cope with feeling terrible, was to try harder. What I didn't know was the feeling of feeling terrible was what I needed to dive into. I just didn't have the tools or the support to go deeper. So part of the reason this podcast is here is to start to share those tools and those reasons for going deeper. I say that depending on how big that feeling is, we often don't have a lot of choice in what we can do about it. Sometimes it's so big that it is consistently internally distracting us. And there are two reasons for that. Number one, the feeling itself. But number two, that underneath this feeling, in this place of disconnection, is pain, is deep pain. So we not only have this distracting feeling, beneath it we have pain. And pain is very big. It takes up a lot of room inside of us, and it prevents us from living wholly and connected with others. So that's why it's important to dig down to the root of the feeling, to heal the root, the disconnection, the pain, and allow the feeling to release so that we are able to access the place inside of us where we have choice, where we can calm ourselves, and where we make decisions out of feeling whole instead of feeling lack and empty and pain. Now, when I talk about feelings, I'm not talking about momentary feelings, like ones that pop up in reaction to small things in our lives, feelings that fade in minutes or hours. Though those feelings also have messages and reasons for being there, our body doesn't do things for no reason. I'm talking about the ones that have been there for months or years. Sometimes we don't even know what they are. They're pushed so deep down. These are feelings we can't put into words, ones that we're a little afraid of. And yet, if we're able to be honest with ourselves, we're often terrified of reaching down and touching those feelings, discovering what they are, and facing them. Maybe we have a name for the feeling already. I didn't when I was very young, but as I got older, I was able to get a little bit more in touch with it and begin to put a name to it. But then sometimes we feel we can't say it out loud. We don't feel we can talk to other people about it. Sometimes it has been shamed in society. It is shamed in other mothers or other corporate men, or in the groups that we run in. Certain feelings are not talked about. That's part of the reason why this podcast is here. We're going to go deep. We're going to talk about this kind of stuff. And hopefully, as we talk about it, we'll all discover together that these things are a very normal part of the human experience. It is a very normal trauma response. It is a normal body response to disconnect from little pieces of us, to have difficult feelings come and sit in us, to push those feelings down, to not even know that they're there. And then sometimes they're triggered by crisis, by something unexpected happening. And these feelings come rushing up to the surface, and it feels like they make our life very difficult for a while. We're going to talk about that another time. Today, I'm not going to tell my story in depth. As time goes on, you'll hear bits and pieces. But at the core of my story is not this idea that all these events and things happen to me. If I go back to the 7-year-old, 9, 11-year-old girl that I was, at the core of my story is a feeling. a feeling that I had from the time I was very little that something was very wrong inside of me. I couldn't feel good no matter how hard I tried. I tried to escape from it. I tried to avoid it. I tried to numb it. I even dissociated, which I often felt like I was living outside of my body. I could feel things with my skin, but nothing reached this emotional self. Nothing reached my heart. I had just detached from how uncomfortable certain pieces of me were, certain pieces of my life. And it took between 20 and 25 years for me to find a way to verbalize that feeling, which was a tangle of a few different feelings and then beliefs that kind of formed around them. The feeling was, I am not happy. Something is wrong. One day someone will find out that something is wrong with me. So I have to keep myself hidden and small, and I can never say anything. I am not fulfilled. And inside me was this pervasive drive, this deep knowledge that I couldn't validate, but I still had, that there's got to be something more to life than this. And untangling my life backward from that feeling was a journey of decades, from the teen years when I had the feeling but couldn't express it. I had no idea what the feeling was, to the adult years when I recognized pieces of it, but then I felt ashamed of not being happy when I was doing all the things that I should have done to have achievement, to have happiness and success. So I shamed myself away from addressing the feelings. And then to even later when I realized that feelings had roots and could be explored. And I began to unwind the story of them. That was a point where I had healed some of the shame. And when I was brave enough and supported enough to go deep into those feelings, that's when the feelings shifted and my life began to change. I could heal what was wrong and start to feel different. And honestly, it didn't take as long as you would think. Sometimes these things have been buried so deep in us for so long, they themselves are longing to be released. There is a part of you that wants to feel healed and full, and it will go running for it if it sees that the doorway is open. The only reason I could go there at last was that I addressed the shame that covered the feelings. It's hard enough that things happen to us in life and cause these feelings. You know, I am not happy. I am not fulfilled. Something is wrong. But then shame comes. Not the idea that we have done something wrong or we have a feeling that is wrong, but that we, at our core, are wrong. We think something is wrong with me. I am wrong because I'm not happy or fulfilled. I'm too much for people. I'm not enough for people. I'm not good enough or perfect enough. And I can never tell anyone that because then they would see how awful I am inside. And on top of that, we often think that we are the only ones having this experience. So I'm here to talk about these kinds of feelings, this kind of shame, the stuff that we believe deep down that we can never tell anyone. I'm here to say one thing. You are not the only one who is having these feelings. You're not the only one who feels the shame. I'm here to tell you that you deserve to let go of the shame. You deserve to explore your feelings. You deserve to reconnect to your very whole self at the center of you. The wise, loving center of you that knows everything you need to know about how to find yourself, how to find what's missing, the thing that's missing, not the thing you go looking for outside of you, like some answer that's out there, but the answer that's inside of you about how to live happy and fulfilled. That's your sacred self, and it's waiting for you. So for today, take a moment and ask yourself, what's the deep down feeling I've never given myself permission to acknowledge? What's the one thing I'm scared to say to someone? Just take a deep breath and just for right now, allow yourself to get to know that feeling. Acknowledge it. You don't have to do anything with it right now. Just notice it. Allow it back into your awareness. And then see what happens in the next little while as you keep acknowledging your feeling and getting curious about it, about why it's there and what it wants to tell you. Thanks for listening. And if this has resonated with you today, subscribe to the podcast and join me next time on Seeking the Sacred Self, where we'll go a little bit deeper again.